Hello, heroes and villains. Welcome to Multiverse. Today, we will talk about PP. Some of you guys have been asking if I saw the Invincible TV show and what I thought about it. So today will be the day of days. Today, that's what we're talking about. I will go into spoilers a bit later. I will start by giving my general idea about the show and also about the comics. But later on, I will give you a big spoiler warning when we do get into spoilers. Overall, I love that show. It's pretty much the best, not just the best animated show, the best TV show I saw in a long time. The last time I remember liking an animated TV show this much was probably the first season of Young Justice. Holy crap, was that good! The first season of The Flash also comes to mind, or even the first season of Heroes, and I'm sure something else I failed to mention. And it's been a long time since we had a show this good and this well written. I'm sure you guys know by now, my channel is not a hate channel. I'm not a big fan of hate porn, although I do watch some once in a while. But overall, if there's something that I don't like, I promised myself eons ago that I would not turn this channel into a hate channel. If there's something I hate, usually I don't even mention it. In the case of Invincible, no problem there. I love the show. But let's get rid of a couple of things that I don't like about the show. The first thing is, of course, they couldn't help themselves. Nowadays, whenever they adapt to something from the past, they have to do a whole bunch of gender swap or race swap. Although in the case, at least so far, it doesn't seem to be much of an issue. Maybe later in the series it will be an issue, but so far I've seen 5 episodes of the show and it's not really an issue. A lot of the characters that they've swapped were background characters or characters that, let's say, disappear very quickly. So in the overall storyline, it doesn't matter. And although there's a pretty feminist overtone to the TV show, there is some social messaging, but not enough that you cannot ignore it. I can already ask why would you want to ignore social messaging? Sadly, when I watch TV shows or movies or I read comics to be entertained, and not really to be lectured at. One of the reasons why I started reading comics way back when is that it had a nice mixture of action, adventure. Like it was pretty much 80% action adventure and maybe 20% drama, and that was perfect like that. Sadly, at some point, that balance sadly went out the window, which is why pretty much, and it's not something that's new, it's been going on for quite some time now, which is probably why at some point a lot of us started turning towards other sources of entertainment. That's why, probably why the Justice League TV show, especially Justice League Unlimited, was so popular. At the time, comics were not that great, but the Justice League TV show was filling the void that the comics sadly were no longer filling. And then, of course, and the same happened with movies. At some point, the best superhero movies were movies like The Matrix, especially Matrix 3. I remember when we saw the fight between Neo and Agent Smith. It was the Zod Superman fight we had been waiting for our whole lives. So at some point, we had to pretty much turn to movies to be able to get our 80% action, 20% drama. And then some TV shows also started getting it also. Like Arrow was awesome for that. Again, Arrow is filling a void that comics sadly no longer were doing. And for Arrow, I guess it was a bit easier. Like we used to have Smallville. Smallville, one of the issues is that they needed a lot of special effects. And special effects are expensive. So you pretty much had 50 minutes of drama and then 2 minutes of action in Smallville, because that 2 minutes would be uber expensive. Filming drama costs nothing. You have two people arguing around a coffee table. That's all you need to be able to film a drama. So that's why shows like Smallville were pretty much mostly drama. And then you had like a 30-second or 2-minute action bit that would pretty much use up 90% of the budget of the show. And then with Arrow, they were able to put in a bit more action in Arrow because Arrow did not require special effects as much. Yeah, they would need some special effects, but all of the effects, a lot of the fight scenes in Arrow were actually done on screen. They were done with stuntmen, so they did not need special effects as much. So they were able to put in a bit more action in TV shows like Arrow, which was perfect. And even later on when they had the Flash, in the Flash again, a whole bunch of it was drama, which was fine. It was to be expected, especially in a CW TV show. But there was some nice, some cool action bits, and we saw things especially the first season of Flash. We saw things we never thought we would see, and we saw Gorilla Grodd. Never in a million years would we have expected to see Gorilla Grodd in a TV show, and there it was. So the Flash started breaking the balance a bit, whereas the effects were pretty expensive to produce in the Flash. So Flash started leaning towards the tendency of having a bit more drama and a bit less action. And sadly, by the third season, I just couldn't do it. The drama was too much. So when I watch TV shows, I want to be entertained. I don't want to be lectured at. And so far, it seems Invincible seems to be doing that. So right now, the social messaging is subtle enough that we can pretty much ignore it if we want to. But I'm a bit hesitant because by the end of the series, they might go crazy and go full social messaging. I guess we'll have to wait and see. That's why also I didn't talk much about the Superman TV show. I kind of like it so far. The Superman bits are nice enough. But there's a whole bunch of family drama, and I'm waiting any day now for them to pull the rug from under our feet and go full social messaging with that show. I guess we'll have to wait and see for that. So these are pretty much the biggest complaint I have about the show: the gender swapping or race swapping, and some of the social messaging, which is very minor. So that should tell you that that show is pretty awesome so far. And even though I did read the comics in the past, the show they are following pretty much the structure of the comic, or the main storyline of the comic. But there's enough stuff that's different that even though I did read the comics, I do enjoy the show as well. I guess they managed to eliminate some subplots that were not really needed, and they were able to focus a bit more on some of the more important subplots. And even knowing where the storyline is leading us, it's still a pretty awesome show so far. And they have a nice balance with the characters. Yeah, there are good characters, there are bad guys, there are good guys, there are bad guys, and anything in between. But even the bad guys, like Titan, even though Titan is an evil bad guy, they have added layers to the character. The character is a family guy. He has a wife, he has a daughter, he wants to do what's best for them. But even though there's a good side to the character, he's technically a bad guy. So they have a nice balance with most of the characters. Because the characters like Cecil, you can tell that Cecil is supposed to be a good guy. He's pretty much a Nick Fury of the Invincible universe. So he is pretty much a good guy, but even then, you can see that how he can be ruthless sometimes. How he can be, sometimes he'll go into zones of grays that don't make him 100% a good guy sometimes. Although there are some characters like Rexplode. Rexplode is 100% a douchebag. There's no other way to describe him. In this case, he's almost like a caricature the way they portray him. He's a douchebag through and through. But overall, they do have a lot of nuances to their characters. Although with Nolan, knowing where the storyline is taking us, Nolan is a bit more, let's say, he's a bit more aggressive than he was in the comics. So overall, Invincible is pretty much what if Superman had a son, and there's also a non-mixture of Spider-Man and Batman Beyond. So it's a mixture of, imagine like Superman having a son, Invincible being the son of Superman, and having some Spider-Man element and some Batman Beyond element. That's the closest way I can describe the TV show. And you'll see a lot of the Spider-Man influence is not very subtle at all. You'll see a character that's called the Elephant. It's pretty much the Rhino, but they've given him an elephant skin as opposed to a rhino skin. There's another character that's pretty much Dr. Octopus with a whole bunch of tentacles, but instead of having metallic tentacles, it's some sort of organic tentacles that come out from the front of his chest. They have an electric character, which would remind us of Electro. So there's a whole bunch of background characters that are very inspired by actual characters, and a lot of them come straight out from Spider-Man. Although in some cases we have the Guardians of the Globe, which are obviously their equivalent to the Justice League, and early on it's right on the nose. You have the Green Ghost, which is pretty much the Green Lantern stand-in. You have Martian Man, which is obviously Martian Manhunter. You have the Red Rush, which is the Flash, although somehow they made him a Russian version of the Flash. And of course, you have the Aquaman stand-in. I have to admit, I completely forget the name of the character, but it's a fish. Basically, the Aquaman is a humanoid fish, and it's pretty awesome. So in the comics, they did not really shy away from using pastiche to be able to recreate already well-known character within the Invincible universe. There's even one character that I forget his name, the Demon Detective or something like that. Where at first when you saw the character, it was Rorschach. The way the speech bubbles were done the same way it was for Rorschach in the Watchmen comic. The character was looking exactly like Rorschach until you saw the face of the character, and then the face was different. It was a demon face as opposed to the Rorschach face that Rorschach actually has. In the TV show, they changed the look of the character quite a lot. You still can see the Rorschach element with the trench coat and the hat, but overall they pretty much redesigned it so that it doesn't look as much like Rorschach anymore. So the show is pretty awesome. The characters are very much three-dimensional characters, except a few exceptions, like I mentioned, Rexplode. And even if you have read the comics, there is enough surprises that it will hold your interest. I have to admit, I did not read the comics in a long time, and I stopped reading the comics around issue 70-ish. Basically, sadly, sometimes in life, there are times where reading comics is not very important. There are things that sometimes become more important than going to the comic shop every week. So I read the Invincible comics until about issue 70 something. There are some Invincible compendium you can get from Amazon. Basically, there's 3 compendiums. They're somewhat pricey if you buy all 3 of them. Although if you do buy the Comixology version, it's about $25 each. I have to admit, I did not read the comics in a long time. And I stopped reading the comics around issue 70-ish. Basically, sadly, sometimes in life, there are times where reading comics is not very important. There are things that sometimes become more important than going to the comic shop every week. And at some point, I was able to read Invincible until about issue 70 something. And it's something that I often do. Like when we had the Hellboy movies, I hadn't read the comics in quite a while, and I did not read the comics until I saw the movie. Just so that I could have a somewhat fresh point of view on the Hellboy movie. So with Invincible, I did not read the comics in a while. I'm tempted to go back and read them again. And also I'm tempted to go read the comics I did not read just yet. But I'm also tempted to not read the comics until I see at the very least the first season. Hopefully there'll be more seasons of Invincible, who knows. But I read the comic until about issue 70 something. It was around the time of what they called the Invincible War. And even though I did not read the comics afterwards, I saw a bit what happened in the comics. At some point, they gave Invincible a new costume. I suppose it's a sort of stunt to try to attract a new reader somehow. They also had our friend Invincible be race swapped. Or not so much race swapped as I think he was badly hurt, and then he was replaced by another guy for a while, and they used that as an opportunity to be able to race swap the character. I guess to try to get some sort of publicity for the comics or something. But then later on, Invincible came back as the main character. And by the end of the series, I think the Invincible becomes a female character. I'm not sure if it's the daughter of Invincible who takes over or someone else completely different. Again, I did not read the whole series, so I should probably do that at some point. So now let us go into spoilers and talk a bit more about the TV show. So the first episode pretty much follows what happens in the comics. In the first 4, 5, 6 issues of the comics, I forget. And basically we have what seems to be Invincible, and who's being the son of Omni-Man, who is pretty much Superman in that universe. And early on, the way they were treating that relationship was that Omni-Man was pretty much like working 9 to 5 as a superhero. So when he would get back home at 5, the wife would be doing the supper, and they would sit around the table like a normal family. And it's we kind of sort of get that vibe in the first episode. Although they did try to give the wife a more important role. In here, she's selling houses or something like that. She's not just a housewife. And also, Nolan was pretty much the cool guy, the nice guy, like the Boy Scout. He was Superman basically. In the show, they made him a bit more, let's say, impatient or aggressive. I guess to try to foreshadow what's coming next. But by the end of the first episode, if you don't know already, by the end of the first episode, you have Omni-Man who pretty much brutally murders the Guardians of the Globe. In the comic, he does that easily enough. In the animated show, they had him struggle a bit more, and it gives us a pretty awesome action sequence. And but there are a few nice action bits, like the show starts with the Guardians of the Globe intervening when the Marler twins are attacking the White House. And right there, it starts with a pretty nice action sequence, but with Nolan literally butchering the Guardian of the Globe. It ends again with a pretty strong action sequence. Although unlike the comics, in the comics Nolan wipes them up and barely has a scratch. In the animated shows, they actually made him struggle quite a bit, and by the end, after he killed everyone, he falls down and he passes out. So we have Nolan who pretty much ends up in intensive care, but being Nolan, being a Superman, he pulls through easily enough. I guess they were able to use that to make it a bit more dramatic, and also to have Omni-Man's wife worry about him. Because normally, like in the comics, she wouldn't worry. Like he would go fight aliens, she wouldn't worry because he always came back. He would go into another dimension, and she wouldn't worry because he would be coming back. But here, they were able to make him, and they used that to be able to make him into a situation where she would actually worry to, I guess, create some extra drama. So they are trying to inject a bit more drama in the TV show than they had in the comic, and also they're adding a lot of scenes where characters are sharing their feelings. We already had that in the comic, but we do get a bit more of that in the TV show. It's something that we had a lot in the CW TV shows, and I guess they're trying to appeal to a younger audience or a teen audience. They seem to think that extra drama is the way to go. So they are adding a bit of extra drama and a bit of extra sharing your feelings. So there's quite a lot of characters sharing their feelings or needing validation and being told that they are awesome and they can do it. But it's something that's pretty much in every TV shows they're in right now. So I guess the weakest part is the mystery they're trying to build into the show. Like we already saw Nolan killing the Guardian of the Globe. So having the demon detective going around and trying to figure out what happened. Whenever they try to set up a mystery and you're already like 3 steps ahead of the mystery, it's not really a good idea. But overall, despite the mystery being a non-mystery, it doesn't detract too much. They are building up Omni-Man to be, let's say, a not so good guy, but they're a lot less subtle in the animated show as they were in the comics. Although it does lead us to a pretty awesome sequence at the end of episode 2. Holy crap! When he goes with the flag sand back to their dimension, and he pretty much gives them a message that they won't be able to ignore. Earth is not theirs to conquer, meaning that he's already on the job to do that. And then he wipes out the Flaxen's planet. So that was a pretty awesome sequence. And then when they threw a lot of monochromatic reds to illustrate that point, which made Nolan look pretty sinister and pretty evil, as I usually say. But again, the whole mystery thing doesn't work so well because we already know that Nolan is a bad guy. Although they might give us a Pepsi twist and turn him into a good guy before we know it, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, if you did read the comics, you know that Nolan is not really a good guy. And the Viltrumites are certainly not good guys. And in the comics, again, it was a lot more subtle. Here, not so subtle. But I'm not sure if it's because it's not so subtle or maybe just I know where the story's leading. So that might be why I don't find it as subtle in the animated TV show. That's quite possible. But the way Nolan acts a lot more aggressive sometimes. He says things that are not very nice sometimes. I guess to plant the seed that he is not a good guy. And there's a few changes they made from the comics that I don't really understand. Like in the comics, Invincible was reading a comic called The Science Dog. But somehow they changed that to Seance Dog. Like instead of the technology-based character, they made it into a magic-based character. Not sure why the change. There might be a reason later down the line for a story purpose. I guess we'll have to wait and see for that. And early on, they seems to be planting the seeds for the Invincible Atom Eve relationship, which was always a bit weird to me, and the TV show makes it even more obvious. Is that you wonder why did Invincible even go out with Amber to begin with? It was obvious from the start that he had a crush on Atom Eve, and it was obvious she liked him as well. But I guess it was one of some of that forced teen drama that they felt they had to add into the show. So they had to create some sort of a triangle between Amber, Atom Eve, and Invincible. Although here Amber is a bit more bossy than I remember, but I could be misremembering. Again, it's been a while since I read the comics. There are a few inconsistencies sometimes. There's an episode where you have Invincible who goes into space to fight Alan the alien. And basically, they show us that Invincible doesn't need to breathe all that much, or that he can hold his breath a long time. But then at some point, they go to Omni-Man, and Invincible goes to Mount Everest, and somehow Invincible is running out of air because they're in high altitude, but he can go into space. So there's a few bits here and there where they did not think things through, and that would be, I guess, one of those. And there's a fun bit with Alan the alien, where he tells him that he has to go to Urath, and then Invincible tells him, no, this is Earth. And you have to wonder, like, does the alien language uses Earth alphabet? So, but it's something that you can pretty much ignore easily enough. But there's a bit like with the Marlowe twins, where the Marlowe twins always have this banter where they say, you're the clone, no, you're the clone, no, you're the clone. In case you do not know, the Marlowe twins are clones. Or at least one of them is a clone. And somehow they never know who's the clone, and they always argue about, you're the clone, no, you're the clone. And at some point we do see the cloning process, and we do see the way that the character shares his memory with the clone, and you would think that he would remember on which table the clone is standing. So that would be the one time where he would have to admit it. Okay, I'm the clone. The clone was on this table. I'm on this table, so I am the clone. But again, I guess to try to keep the running gag of you're the clone, no, you're the clone, they kind of ignored that bit a bit. Yeah, you have to suspend your disbelief a bit, I guess. And I mentioned how Rexplode is really a douchebag. I have to admit, I'm wondering if they're setting that up so that at some point he will sort of redeem himself. Is it going to be a story arc? He starts being a douchebag, and then eventually is going to become a not so a douchebag, or are they going to keep him a douchebag all the way through? I guess we'll have to wait and see for that. And there's one thing also that the show has pulled all the stops is with gore. You see gore, you see entrails, you see blood, you see all that stuff. I never really understood that. Remember when we had the Deadpool leak? Before they made the Deadpool movie, there was this leak that was pretty much a PG-13 version of Deadpool, and no one complained. No one at all. It was everyone thought it was awesome. But somehow, when we got but somehow later on with the movie, they had to make it rated R, which is fine. They can make it rated R if they want to. But I never understood people who insist that things have to be rated R, that you have to see some gore or some extreme violence. It could be because I was pretty much raised up on PG-13 comics. A lot of the comics I read or a lot of the TV shows I watched were pretty much PG-13. So it never really made much sense to me that whether TV shows had to have some gore or even comics. But here they went all the way. You see blood, you see gore, you see all of that stuff. I don't think it makes the story better. I don't think it has an impact on the story. Doesn't really matter if you see the guts of the character or not. But some people seem to think that it's important. And visually, the show looks amazing. They went with a fairly realistic animation style, which is perfect for the show. And they have some really realistic backgrounds. So sometimes they'll have some really gorgeous painted backgrounds. Sometimes they'll have some really nice cityscape, which are sometimes a mixture of 3D and sometimes a mixture of a painted background. And it looks pretty awesome. And they did a good job of having the characters pop a bit from the background. I know that there are some people who somehow don't like that. I'll never really understand that. And basically, you want to have your characters pop a bit from the background so that you don't lose them in the background. The earliest example I can think of that is the Phantom. Eons ago, there was this comic strip called The Phantom, which was published in black and white. And then at some point, they decided to do the strip in color. And at first, they decided to have the character being colored green because obviously he's standing in the jungle. So if you want to be able to camouflage yourself in the jungle, you wear a green costume. And then they quickly realized that it was a bad idea. The character was blending in the background so well, it was so well camouflaged that you barely could see him. And then they decided to go the extreme opposite. In Europe, they went with a red costume. In America, they went with a purple costume. Throughout the years, they stuck with the purple costume. So that's why the Phantom has a purple costume. Basically, at first, his green costume, you would get lost in the background. So they decided to give him a purple costume so that he could stand out a bit. And in animation, it's not that different. We had the Zack Snyder Justice League not too long ago, where basically the tone of the character were very close or very similar to the tone of the background. But these are actual living flesh and blood characters. So it's easier to be able to read, even if they have the same tone as a background, it's fairly easy to be able to still read what those actors are doing. When it comes to animation, it's usually two-dimensional drawings, and it's usually also, sometimes it's very stylized drawings as well. So you sometimes need the characters to stand out from the background a bit so that you can actually read their actions, you can recognize easily who they are, and that's why also very often in animation you'll see exaggeration. And overall, the look of the characters is very close to the comics. In some cases, it might be a bit simplified or stylized so that it can be a bit easier to animate. So most of the characters are simple enough that they probably didn't struggle too much to animate them. So right now, it's a pretty good series. I would highly recommend it. Hopefully, they won't pull a Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was a pretty awesome TV show until they dropped to the ball in the last season. Hopefully, they won't do the same with Invincible. I guess we're going to have to wait and see for that. There is talk also of a live-action Invincible TV show. I have to admit, I am a bit curious about that. And I'm curious to see also if they will stick close to the comics the way the animated series did, or if they will take more liberties because it will be a live-action TV show. A lot of the stuff they do in the animated series would be very expensive if they did that in a live-action show. So unless they have a huge budget to make that live-action Invincible TV show, my guess is they will probably make some creative decisions to try to make the show less expensive to produce. And also, I'm curious to see, will they remain faithful to the costumes, or will they do like all the live TV shows and feel like they have to change the costumes for the TV show? I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that. So I would suggest watch the first season of Invincible. And after watching the first season, I would recommend reading the comics. If you watch the TV show and you like it, I'm pretty sure you will like the comics as well. And now let us take a quick look at our friend Invincible within DC Universal 9. So as you can see, we can create a pretty good version of our friend Invincible. Sadly, I don't have the blue part that should be at the top of the costume. We don't quite have a style that allows us to do that. But here with the some of the newer style we got not too long ago, like we got the 31st century slimline style not too long ago, so the C style is pretty much perfect to recreate our friend Invincible. The same for the chest piece and for the pants. For the gloves, there's a whole bunch of gloves we could use. Here I went with the Argus Operative. For the boots, I went with the Vengeful Surgeon, but there is a texture within the boots that I don't like very much, so I'm using the blue iridescent material to be able to get some nice blue boots like our friend Invincible had. There's a bit more texture in the boots than it should have, but well, within the context of DC Universal 9, sometimes you have to make some compromises. For the headpiece, I went with the Defiant Crusader. For the face, I went with the Bug Goggles. And for the hairstyle, I have a tendency to go for the con job hairstyle by default, but the texture of the hairstyle would do well enough. It's not exactly it, but it's close enough that I've used it a couple of live streams ago, and right away people knew that this was Invincible. At some point, our friend Invincible had a new costume in the comics, and using the very same style, all we need to do is change the yellow for blue, and we pretty much have the new costume that Invincible had in the comics. And we can create a pretty good version of Omni-Man in DC Universal 9. Actually, I've seen a couple of Omni-Mans in DC Universal 9 lately, so I think the TV show does have some influence, at least at the moment. For the hairstyle, I had to use the texture mustache one, so that we could have the mustache that Nolan has in the show. It's not exactly it, but it's as close as I was able to get. For the chest, I went with the high collar chest piece. The pants, I stuck with the 31st Century Slimline C. For the feet, I went with the nuclear boots. Well, there's a whole bunch of other boots you could use. You could use the Solar Defender. The gloves, I went with the Ironod gloves. We don't really have a nice slimline pair of gloves, but these work well enough. The back piece, the classic back piece, is perfect. And for the emblem, I kept things simple. I went with the O emblem. So this pretty much allows us to create a pretty good looking Omni-Man within the context of DC Universe Online. There is a Rexplode that we can sort of recreate in DC Universe Online. It's not exactly it. It shouldn't be skin tight like this. And also he has like this huge collar around the neck, but within the context of DC Universe Online, sadly sometimes you have to make compromises. So for the headpiece, I went with the V Slimline. The face is the Arctic gear. And for the shoulders, I went with New Genesis, but you don't really have to use the shoulders, but I thought they worked well enough. For the chest, the less bad option we had was the reverse slimline, the two-color slimline for the pants, the Argus operative for the belt, and the Gadgeteer for the boots. Although there's a bit of textures in the boots, so you might prefer to use something like the Midnight boots instead. It's not exactly it, but with the styles we have in this Universe Online, it's close enough. And next we have Darkwing. I could have sworn that Darkwing 2 was a black guy. It could be that they made a race swap in the TV show. The TV show Darkwing is a black guy. It's been a while since I read the comics, so it could be that Darkwing was a black guy and then it was replaced by Darkwing 2, which was also a bad guy. But either way, you can make a pretty good version of Darkwing using the V Slimline headpiece, the Chevron chest piece, the New Genesis pants, the Vengeful Surgeon boots, the Ironod gloves, and we have the Knight of Vengeance cape, which is perfect for our character. We can create a pretty good version of our friend Atom Eve, although I could not get the short shorts like she has. And I could not find a pair of short shorts that kind of reproduced the sort of pattern she had on her shorts. For the face, I went classic with the emissive eyes. For the back, the short cape was perfect. For the chest, I went with the Chevron Slimline. For the pants, the 31st Century Slimline C. The Supergirl boots. For the auras, there's a bunch of auras we could use. I went with the Amethyst Mist aura. And for the hairstyle, I just went with the classic hairstyle. For the emblem, I went with the Atom emblem, but I didn't really have an emblem that looked like the emblem she used. So we can create a somewhat good version of Atom Eve in this Universe Online. And here let us show Duplicate. Again, it's not exactly it, but it's close enough. So for the chest piece, the 31st Century Slimline C, and for the pants, the 31st Century Slimline A. For the gloves, I went with the formal gloves, and the emblem, any number would do the trick depending on which version of a duplicate you are. For the hairstyle, I stuck with the classic. So I guess you could make a whole bunch of armories with different emblems, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or heck, I wonder if we would see someday a league of duplicates, where every characters would be duplicate, but with a different number. If you guys ever pulled that off, let me know. And so what about you guys? Did you watch the Invincible TV shows? Did you read the comics? Let us know in the comment section down below, and tell us what you thought about either the TV show, the comics, or both, or some of the differences between the TV show and the comics. At this point, there's literally hundreds of characters in the Invincible universe. I only showed a handful of them. Making a proper Invincible video would probably require a lot of research and a lot of time. I'll see if I can do a follow-up in the future. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions, feel free to ask so in the comment section down below, and I'll see what I can do about answering your questions. I have roughly 2,000 videos about this Universe Online at this point, so if I don't answer a question right away, just search in my videos. Odds are I already made a video that answered your question. or click one of the videos that you see on your screen right now. Bye bye.